Okay, good evening. It is the 26th of June 2014, and I'm here this evening with James Horak and Shuni. And I have been asked by a friend to ask James what happens to you after death. Unfortunately, a friend of mine has just lost someone dear to them. And as we all know, we all want to know what happens after death so that we can still feel close to our loved ones. So in your own words, James, would you be able to help us understand the process of what happens to the mind and the soul after the body has left this physical plane?
I would like to try. I would be demystifying a number of beliefs that are mythological in origin and not much more.
Okay. Would you like to elaborate on that?
The ancients were very aware. Perhaps they had a residual knowledge from a former lineage we really would have no way of knowing. But they believed in something called the ether. Now, the ether roughly could be representative of the helium, or it could be representative of anything only partially understood but known to be there. Mm-hmm. And in the case of the soul, enough evidence exists as anomaly to indicate that there is expressly something left of an individual when they pass on. And hence the term or phrase pass on, which is indicative of that, if not an acceptance of it. When a person passes on, the mind, which is not represented by the brain, but by functions that begin in the brain, but are basically nothing more than very similar to what goes on in a hard drive in a computer. It's the field that's created and generated by that hard drive where all the data assimilation and the processing comes and goes. That energy that is capable of doing that in a magnetic field is similar to that of the soul, which becomes expressed with another stage in its growth upon death, when this mind and soul integrate and become spirit. A lot of people use the term soul and spirit interchangeably, and they're not. The further back you go, the more expressly precise concepts of these understandings are, which should indicate that a lot has been lost. A lot of not just precision, but overall understanding of the phenomena that is now more anomalous than it was 2,000 years ago. The travel of the spirit requires energy. And as this spirit that has manifested from the combining of the mind and soul begins to seek a place, it uses energy, and it will, over a period of time, become cold. And this will attract it to stars or suns. When it goes into a sun for warmth and to rejuvenate its energy, it may be in proximity to EMVs. Eventually it will be. And it will feel the pull, the emotional pull of the language of the EMVs through coming from the chambers inside where spirits reside, where they, as a whole, entertain the knowledge of the universe and share experience. And this is a wonderful thing, and there's nothing better. We have a hard time understanding that, I think, because of the way that we hold the carnal pleasures. Some people, though, know that by divorcing themselves from carnal pleasures, they're capable of an understanding beyond those carnal pleasures, of a focus beyond those carnal pleasures, and of actually knowing feelings of much higher caliber, because the material values mean relatively nothing. So once this spirit is attracted to the EMVs and goes inside, and it will be drawn into a chamber. I'm not sure how that selection is made, because there are 25 or 30 chambers in an EMV. They'll be drawn inside and probably never leave. That's their choice, though. I've had people jump to the conclusion when I've mentioned this before that they were entombed, incarcerated, imprisoned, and that isn't true. There is no finer existence than this existence. Some have attached it as spiritual technology, but it's more. Spiritual technology is unique to a culture that has found a way to exist as individuals, exist their consciousness and collective awareness at a level beyond the physical. For that reason, they want to survive death, want to survive mortality, and still have the memories and the cultural history that they prize. Because, sooner or later they know something. They're informed something about, like I am doing now, they're informed something about what happens to the spirit. And they'll inevitably ask the same things that question people ask now. Will we have the memories? Will we have friendships? Will there be others that we prize value here? Will we even have our pets and that kind of thing? And of course, I have to answer no. Somewhere along the line, in the way this has all been put together, some intelligence deemed that unprofitable, deemed that there were higher concerns than familiarity, and that would limit the things that could happen and do happen now. But these people, of course, they're free to do this, although I think they may be. I'm not sure because I haven't had contact with spiritual technology communities because they shun everyone else, except maybe others that have reached the same level of manifestation. I don't know. Sometimes I think I come across these people in stars when I'm warming up to go in the EMVs. I don't know. I see things, I see people, I see structures that I can't explain.
So you go through the same process as the spirit of, say, myself would do, whereby your spirit... Right,
no,
okay.
No, I don't. I have to agree in energy with the EMV before I can go in it. But as far as having a spirit like you will have, or Shuni, or anyone else, no. Because that would probably, I don't know for certain, that would probably interfere with my function, since I am part of this system and I don't operate on the same way. That would probably get in the way of my servicing my tasks.
Okay. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. That seems like a shame because it's almost like you're missing out on something, but then you are, if I understand this correctly, you are actually part of the EMVs and come here.
Well, I do envy the spiritual life of mortals turned spirit because it's a beauty. I can watch the energies going on inside the chambers through these crystalline windows, kind of like what you would see in a real fancy cathedral. It looks like oil mixing, different colors of oils mixing but keeping their own unique tone. And there's a feeling of joy, and of course it's the language that is produced there that is what the EMVs have. And it's an emotional language, beautiful. It's like music. And of course it can move you. When I'm away very long, I get this most mournful overtone to come back. And so it's very gripping, very emotionally letting. And that's as close as I come to the spiritual life that's inside the chambers. But it's quite adequate to me. Although I do wish sometimes very much that I could share what's going on. But that's enough.
So, thank you for that, by the way. So, each individual person on this planet has a mind which is connected to a source, if you want to call it, of all knowledge, and a soul while we are here. Would you equate the soul to the battery that keeps, almost like the battery life of the body that keeps us alive? And when we die, when someone passes on, it's a much nicer word, passes on, the soul and the mind combine to become spirit. Do we just have one chance at this? Because our lives here can vary. Some are taken very young. Some live quite long lives. Are we able to come back? Do we always feel that pull towards the EMVs? Do we always enter into a star? But then do we come back and have another chance? Could you try and explain that to us? I know you've said before about a soul life has a certain number. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, there's a limit on how long that a person has before the soul reaches its maturity, or where it no longer has the options that people talk about as reincarnation or walk-ins or any of that. I know that there are rare instances of that, but that's because a particular spirit has clinged to the history of their mortal life and the concerns for others, and they have a task yet to do, or they put upon themselves a task yet to do, so their residue persists, and maybe that's what some people detect as ghosts, but most of what people talk about as ghosts is anomaly associated with psychic energy. It's not relative to what we're talking about at all, most of it. In rare instances, there are people that do prolong their travel. That's what I would call it, to, I think, satisfy some hope for some outcome for mortals that they're concerned about. Do they impose any will or affect anything? I'm not sure of that. I know that I used a window one time to do something like that in a very subtle way. In this instance, in this lineage, I did. But it was an indulgence that perhaps I shouldn't have done even. And I think that I do know that there are spirits that come out of the chambers. Occasionally, very rarely, they pass through, and where they go or what they're off to do, I don't know. If there is a way of somehow through a series of things remanifesting in a physical plane as a mortal, that's a possibility. But the instances that I know of are so rare as to be relatively unimportant, unmentionable, because we're discussing what people may overall expect, because very, very few of these exceptions actually occur. And, probably anybody that's listening to us will never even come close to experiencing anything like it, because if this sort of thing is working best, it's working to free a person of these afterthoughts so that they can go on very quickly into a state of being that is the most wonderful thing they can have. The knowledge is unlimited. The experiences are unlimited. The beauty of a relationship with others is unlimited, and there can be nothing finer than that. The fact that it's not dependent on energy, it's not dependent on material things, but then again, it still contributes to all those things. And so that's the finest existence there is, most giving, most loving, more extended, non-ending.
That sounds absolutely beautiful. Would you say that we hold a memory up to a certain point of those that we have left behind once we have passed over?
Not in a failed experiment, you don't. Because failed experiments are never fully manifested. So why burden the spirit with that sadness, that failure?
So individually I'll just give you an example. My father died 10 years ago. Would he hold any memory of me as his child, my mother as his wife, and my brother?
No.
No. Okay. So is it much more a more encompassing knowledge that they then gain?
Well, it's not that they gain, but they're given. Gain suggests his personal experience that was taken to share with others. There's a point where none of that matters. After you've been in a chamber any length of time whatsoever, everything has its own timelessness. And in terms of the eternal, time is irrelevant. Everyone uh, everyone feels alive with the experience of others.
So you would say that within the chambers, what experiences you've had are then shared with others?
Well, not experiences that I've had, but over a great deal of time, I've learned here and there, bits and pieces that I've been able to incorporate together to better understand something that I would have given to me very, very quickly were I ever in a chamber.
Yeah, inside the chamber. But you are inside of an EMV.
Yes. There is a great deal of difference between being inside an EMV and being in the chambers. The chambers are reserved for spirits.
So you said that there was between 30 and 40 chambers in each EMV.
25 to 30. Never more than 30.
Never more than 30. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yes.
Is it something that you would be able to explain to us in a way that we would be able to understand?
Let's just say it's the beauty of geometrics.
Ah, okay. Which I have to admit is completely lost on me. Geometrics, is this something that we could investigate ourselves here, or is this something completely out of our sphere of knowledge?
I will spare with you the value of self-acknowledgement, self-awareness, and self-revelation. I am compelled to do that.
Okay, right. I'm trying to think of what questions I would ask, because I'm doing this on behalf of somebody else. You once said to us, and you explained to us, that no memories of a failed experiment ever go with you, so therefore anything bad that happens here is not taken with us because it does not benefit the whole.
Well, it's more than that. No memory of a failed experiment. And all those that are in a failed experiment are going to be passed on to the spirit. Now, in the travel of the spirit before reaching an EMV, there can be some clinging, and that's where I think true ghost phenomena occurs. It's kind of like an uncontrolled energy in itself, kind of like the psychic energy which is performed by a poltergeist. Poltergeist isn't a ghost. Poltergeist is pure psychic energy, usually emitted from a young girl that is just beginning puberty, and in her particular instance, she can unknowingly focus a great deal of psychic energy into the physical world.
Sorry, there was just a huge crash in the kitchen. Get back to where we were.
It was a poltergeist.
Yeah, probably.
You've got a young girl. Are you keeping track of her?
I am, but I suspect it may well have been one of my cats.
Oh, okay.
Although had none of the cats been in the house, I would have wondered, to be fair. This is interesting because I've actually had what I would class as experience with ghosts, and I know quite a few other people have, and the experiences I had, understandably, were quite scary at the time, because the only reason they were scary is because I didn't understand what was happening. So when the spirit is traveling before it gets cold and it goes into a sun, because time here works in a completely different way, because we don't understand the concept of time, it would be a pointless question asking you how long is it before the spirit gets too cold, runs out of energy, and then decides to find a sun.
It varies slightly, but generally about 60 days.
Okay, so in those 60 days, the spirit is free to travel anywhere.
Well, you have to understand it can travel very fast. It can go from one star to the next in an instant.
Wow.
It can also absorb enough energy to destroy a planet.
Really?
Really.
Good Lord. See, our understandings here of energy, I think, are woefully misunderstood, if you want the truth.
Oh, really?
Yeah, woefully misunderstood. Because when you're talking to me, I can't even begin to visualize what it is that you're saying because I have no knowledge base in order to build upon it. And only in my imagination can I try to picture what it is that you're trying to say.
Well, you're doing better than most, Doris.
Thank you. But then I'm more open-minded than most.
Yeah.
So in those 60 days, roughly, as we would count them here on Earth.
Well, let's give or take a week or so.
Okay. Would a spirit hang around the people that they'd left?
Spirits, the impressions that I get are that spirits are unwilling to give up something about the environment. And I can't tell you much more than that. There are spirits that will, for a short time until it's stopped, pull energy from other living people. And I don't think they intend to or they mean to. I think they may be a mistaken notion of love or affection or something like that. But spirits are perfectible. They're not predatory or do harm to anything or anyone. It's usually the phenomena that they attach to that's doing that. And maybe they are trying to moderate that or save someone from it.
So as a general rule, you would say that evil spirits do not exist.
Do not exist.
And it is mankind that in a way would create the image of or the feeling of an evil spirit.
There are psychic energies that mortals can create and that can remain an awfully long time as a residue. It's like what the blue flame I talk about. That's one of such. Blue flame is an anxiety, as an anxiety becomes psychic energy, which is imposed on treasure that has been secreted in that concern, that aggravation, anticipation, that anxiety, that it could be found. When it's secreted, is left as a residue, and there are people that can see that as the blue flame. Mm. And there are legends of this in a number of more primitive cultures, especially mountain cultures like you see in East Europe. Bram Stoker was aware of that when he wrote Dracula.
Really? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because he spent a lot of time researching the folklore of that region in particular. And there were children that could see the blue flame, and sometimes they would use these children kind of like farmers who use young hogs to go out and find truffles, to go out and find treasure.
Is there anybody here that has that ability now? You mentioned children. I know children have many abilities before the age of 6 when it is imprinted upon them by the parents, by society, that you're not supposed to do that's rubbish, you can't see those things, nobody sees those things. And then obviously they start to forget these abilities maybe.
I think it's probably about one child out of 100 that has it up until the age of puberty. Unless they learn what it is, and then maybe it'll persist longer than that. I have it, but the only time when I was younger, I had it very clearly at night. I mean, I don't think it can be seen in the daytime. Now, the last time that I saw the blue flame was after I got loaded, totally loaded, and I was coming out of some apartments in Dallas that were right next to an old graveyard. And I was looking at that graveyard and I could see a little blue flame shooting up all over the place, but that was an old graveyard where they probably buried rings and other valuables with the people. So that's my guess. Anyway, of course, the graveyard's a perfect place to secrete treasure, too.
Yeah, it would be. Well, that's very interesting. I wouldn't like anybody to get hold of a child that could actually see this blue flame, because I'm sure they would be used for purposes that weren't good purposes in this world that we live in.
Yeah, well, I hesitate to talk about it, but since I'm open to discuss almost anything right now, since our time may be very short.
Mm. So speaking of short time, I would presume that we here, the odds are that we are going to be a failed experiment.
If people don't get the courage that it takes to change things, and by whatever means, to change things, because we've come to a point where you put aside all your foibles to think about the future of your children, and you do whatever you have to do to secure a future for them, because they have a right, since you brought them into this mess, they have a right to expect enough experience to reach some kind of awareness or a greater sense of wholeness. You know, in travel, the spirit benefits from that.
Why here? Okay, why did I choose to come here?
It's not a matter of choice. It's purely random.
Okay, so all this nonsense that is floating around within the woo-woo fluffy bunny community about this
Pure
being a prison
BS.
planet.
Pure BS.
Not that we actually needed to state that out loud, but, you know, just for the record. So the selection process with regards a spirit coming here is completely random.
It is so rare. It's like I was talking about, perhaps something like that may happen when a spirit leaves a chamber. After it has acquired something that makes it feel like it can make a difference by doing that. I can only say that I've been around a very long time, and it's been only a handful of instances that I've ever seen spirits or a spirit come out of a chamber.
So how did I arrive here? How did my children arrive here? How is the process?
Ultimately, the beginning began with a light wave coming from deep space.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. You cannot destroy energy, so let's talk about it in energetic states, because at the end of the day, that's what a spirit and a soul and mind must be. An energetic state that then becomes a physical state with a mind and a soul within this physical body that I inhabit. As I understand it, my mind here is split. Because of certain factors with regards the moon and the shafts, and the gravity wave is not correct. Therefore, I have a split consciousness whereby I have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Now, also as I understand it, there is a superconscious mind, which, although I'm not a religious person, I would equate to the source of all that is. Am I correct in thinking that?
I'll be more precise.
Okay, please do.
When you have unified consciousness, and you're the only people in the universe that have a split consciousness. If you have unified consciousness, you would have a collective consciousness as well as genetic memory. And being able to incorporate those things, if somebody like me came on the scene, you would know the truth of what I have to say, no matter how fantastic it might seem to a split consciousness. Or you would know exactly the instant that I departed from the truth. Because in that collective consciousness are notes and cards, when struck, immediately touch upon experience. And the genetic memory would rectify it to a particular time period. It would be like you would contain a library that if you wanted to find a particular book and you knew the Dewey Decimal System, you'd find it very quickly. Or a punch card for an old computer, or, a file name for a new computer. The instances in which these experiences can be paralleled with technology that is good and helpful to everyone is almost perfect. There's almost perfect parallel for everything that I can talk about at some level or another. And that's the only way I can chime with people that have a split consciousness, because they have no collective consciousness and no genetic memory. That occurs sometimes, but infrequently. People experience it usually haphazardly, and it's so passingly that it's difficult for them to relay to others and to get others to believe they even had it.
So something within my conscious mind knew. The moment I heard you, there was a recognition. It struck a chord, if that's how you want to put it. I knew that I had found something that I didn't understand why I recognized it, but I recognized it. And that is why both Shuni and I, and eventually Myrid and Crystal and all the other hundreds, possibly thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have since recognized or struck a chord with what it is that you have said. So somewhere within us we remember, even though we do not have that genetic knowledge to remember the past, we somehow felt it and recognized it.
There was a little extra in your light.
My soul light?
What started you off? That little thing that hit a gene just right.
Okay, we need to touch upon this more because I have visions of a rainbow filled with noughts and ones because that's the only way that I can do it. An energy that has come from outside, maybe even our universe, and has literally slapped me on the head. And that sounds really...
If you understand that principle, then you understand that sentience is not bilaterally evolved, but sentience comes from one place. And that is an understanding that's held throughout the extended communities of ET civilizations all over. Of course, there are an endless number of those. The ancients used a term without number. You'd be surprised that either they were highly prescient or they had access to lost information that no longer is to be had in the thinking of so-called modern man.
If that is the case, no ifs, because, then I would be a solidified form of a holographic image.
No. These things begin at a genetic level. What people want to call RNA and DNA represent that as everything that is genetic. It's not. It's kind of like a program for what is going to develop as a trait. And of course, I've expressed that there are very few mutations that have any meaning at all because they involve traits that can't be passed on to the offspring. So they don't persist except in one generation, if that. And usually they are debilitating to the subject. So what people call mutations here are traits that are triggered to become phenotypically by stress that wouldn't otherwise be. This happens more often than people like to think, and it accounts for why so many of these traits can be passed on through the next generation when they couldn't be if this was a mutation. Very seldom could they be.
I think what we've touched upon here is actually really, really important because at what point does the soul enter the body of a fetus? This is what I'm trying to understand. I understand the concept of what happens after death, that the mind and soul combine and become spirit.
It's where at birth. Yes. A reverse speech is detected in a child that's just been born. Even when that child doesn't have the particular language or experience or whatever to denote the metaphors that are used in reverse speech, when the cry of the baby is reversed, those metaphors occur. Reverse speech occurs. So that indicates that at least at the time of birth it's going on. Now, how much further back is an individual thing. There are people that can remember being in the womb.
According to human design system, the soul enters the body 88 days before birth.
Yeah, that makes sense. That may be very true. I can't argue with that. I'd like to think that it wasn't going through all the agony of meiosis and mitosis. Wouldn't you?
Yeah. There's so much that you've already told us this evening alone. I mean, a lot of it you've explained to us over the years that we've known you, and, we've heard it in different interviews. You've said, is there anything else that you would like to add to this, considering how short time that we have? Is there anything that you can add?
I'll say this, that as far as the teachings, the developed teachings of philosophies and many religions, I haven't said anything that contradicts them. All that I've done is I've stuck with the purest form of those beliefs and teachings. And each one of them varies a little bit, but in essence, there is no dichotomy. And the soul is perfectible. It was a corruption to believe that the soul would be punished for the carnal experiences of an individual. That's stupid. I mean, if the soul is perfectible, it's perfectible, isn't it? So why would it be punished? why wouldn't you find Hitler's spirit in the EMVs? On one show that I did with Kevin Smith, there were people that were very
upset. I
remember.
Very
upset about that. But, we are taught that the soul is perfectible, are we not? I mean, this is in the Christian, Buddhist, a Muslim. This is true in all of their beliefs at their purest. Not the little sects in the way they like to rewrite things like the Bible or delete books from the Bible and incorporate crap into what evidently was once very erudite writing, inspired. But no, before things are politicized, when they're pure, I don't find too many disagreements. But once you accept the perfectibility of the soul, to listen to Dante's hell or the hell that's imposed upon the followers of fundamentalist Christianity and other religions is just bizarre. I mean, you either believe in the perfectibility of the soul or you don't. You can't believe in hell and believe in the perfectibility of the soul at the same time. It's just plain contradictory.
So the perfection of the soul is why we are incarnating.
That's what I would call it. I think that you've got 144 years, of course, before one way or the other you're going to be on your way. Now, maybe there is a way, because if a baby dies or someone dies premature and they're not happy with the wholeness that they've achieved in carnal existence, I don't know. I don't know where that choice begins, or if there is a choice, or where it ends, or if it does end. So these are all mysteries to me, but I can speculate on what I've seen and what I know, but it would just still be speculation. So I can't say that reincarnation, as is taught here, is real. I can see where it could be. I can see where it would benefit people to have a more whole carnal existence.
Yeah.
But then again, if I'd ever been in a chamber, maybe I'd say, no, it doesn't matter. But I haven't, so I can only go by impressions and experiences here and there, that nothing that I can build a determination on, though.
So would you say that the soul gains its wholeness by how it lives here? So if you live by a moral core to do right by yourself, to do right by others, and you know the difference between right and wrong, and you live by that set of standards, does it give the soul more of this quality of wholeness when it leaves? So
I would think
maybe it doesn't feel like it needs to come back in order to increase this wholeness, in order then to share it with others within the chambers in the EMVs.
You could rationalize that, of course, and it might be true. But there are people that are as spiritually precocious as they are precocious in being able to pick up languages and scientific principles and mathematics and other things. And so I could say that for whatever reason, it might take people longer to reach a certain plateau where they get this carnal wholeness, or whatever you want to call it. I would suspect that in a society that has continued on the basis of growing out of its technology and growing on beyond where we may not go here on Earth, it doesn't look like we're going to get there, that people retain these experiences and take them with them and enrich the knowledge base that will eventually become owned by the universe through the chambers. Because when you're in a chamber, you're in the wholeness of time, you're in the wholeness of the universe.
You described it once to Cameron that we are cells on the mind of God, if you want to call it. And you know how I feel uncomfortable with the word God, because it's not something that I can...
Well, I don't make a personality out of God. I'm no closer to God, the face of God, than you are. But I will say this, that I think it's kind of childish to try and apply a personality to God. I think that it's important to understand that the balance that exists, which permits us the longevity that we have to reach wholeness in any form, relative or not, is dependent on design. And all of these things fit together to give us that, and maybe a lot more. So,
and if there is design, then therefore there must be a designer.
According to Crystal.
I can see where Crystal came from with that, because where do those light waves come from in order to create each and every individual here? Where do they come from?
Well, all of it isn't complicated if you believe that there are laws that can account for all the anomaly that attach to them. If you believe that, then you won't go around trying to do like they did in the Middle Ages, build all these contraptions that had all of these irregularities to where they could build a model of the solar system with the Earth in the center. And so they had to perambulate all of the moons and all this and had to come up with the most contorted looking thing you ever saw. But they actually did build brass models of these things. And if you ever find one, the old ones are real collectible. But I mean, they're just ridiculous. It all begins with a priori assumption that the Earth is the center, in some cases, not just of the solar system, but of the universe. I mean, how bizarre is that? But the same reasoning is behind the thoughts of bilateral evolution. We had people that up until when I was still in junior high that were writing books in which they were trying to explain that all the races had evolved separately on the Earth. And that's BS. That's just stupid. But once you understand that, it shouldn't be too hard to understand to think of sentience developing bilaterally in the universe is stupid too. I mean, it's I'll say it again, the knowledge that we have here is backward. It is backward when there is so much more that we could know, and you and I and the people that have listened to the information that you've given to us, we know how much has been hidden from us. Anything that would put it together and give you the independence, the true independence of thought, would give you the ability to have enough faith in your own judgment, your own reason, your own ability to find the answers on your own, that you had to be spoon-fed. You had to go to university. There are so many people that are damaged by the political environment attached to getting a PhD. They're damaged by having to be such butt-kissing politicians.
Let's be nice. Let's be nice, because these people don't know. Let's at least give them a chance. Should they have had?
Well, I'm not saying that there aren't studious, intelligent, professional people out there with a PhD that have been demented by the process. I'm just saying that if they had had committees that were reviewing their work and they were defending their thesis or dissertation with instead of the crap that they do, that they would have time and experience to have been so much more, and to have turned that educational process for themselves into so much more. And, of course, they're trying to appease people that are on their committee who may use them to do their research, who may use them for whatever reason, but not for their own reason, not for the pursuit of knowledge, not for finding the truth, and for advancing theory and understanding the way it should be done. So in those years that they are in a PhD program or a master's program, they're actually being molded into something less than a scientist or an inquiring professional, being molded into a politician.
Indeed. Okay, we kind of drifted off conversation, which is fine, because
not
that's what
really.
happens.
It's all
no,
related.
Not really. No, it is
it's all related. If you understand the model of demands that are placed on you here and what it devolves to and how easily corruptible it is, only then will you appreciate something that removes all those evil possibilities from your existence. And then you have what's in the chambers, then you have what becomes spirit, and then you can appreciate it fully and you can look forward to it and have a belief that you don't have to run like a scared rabbit here thinking you're going to lose all that you are, standing up for what you believe in against monsters.
I don't think we can top that tonight, to be honest, because in the situation that we are actually in. I think you've just hit the nail on the head, James.
I hope so.
I really, really do. But so few people actually know that.
Well, that's my importance. I don't have any other importance, really.
It was a very profound piece of information, and it just states it so clearly.
I knew you'd get it.
It really, really does.
It's really what you were asking for, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
I hope that's what the people you're concerned about are asking for.
Yeah, I think they probably are.
But they haven't lost someone. They've just been at the train station when they got on a car to a wonderful place, and they gave him a bon voyage.
Yeah, because I have to say, since I've known you and I understood so much more through asking questions, I look at death a completely different way. And now, even though the pain of losing someone and that loss and that grief that goes with it, to really understand that there is something so unbelievably beautiful to go to compared to where we are now. That person is an energetic form that can never, ever, ever be destroyed, because you cannot destroy energy, and goes on to create something so much more beautiful with what they have learned here, or maybe what they take with them, to then create something even more beautiful elsewhere.
Well, we think of energy in different ways, but spiritual energy is best expressed as something so pure that its mere understanding is regenerating.
There's one to think on. Yeah.
You know, I talk about, and I've said this recently on my Facebook wall, how important approaching anomaly to determine best the information, the understanding that all the secrets have kept from you. That if you work to resolve anomaly, that's the best approach to finding what you can't find out about any other way. Because anomaly, as I've said, always the hint, the clue to the next step up, whether it was in any science or any investigation or any kind of query. But the important thing with respect to spiritual technology is that it is like a prayer. A prayer only becomes truly valid when the person making that prayer has done everything they could possibly do to manifest what they're praying for. And then they pray for the final answer, the final conclusion, the final plateau that their hope, wish, understanding can express, and then resign themselves to the outcome. And this isn't just an alchemical principle or a religious belief, but it is like an open appeal that humbles the conscious mind significantly enough to accept what the subconscious can offer. You know, in the biblical admonition of being one, there is an apprehension that it could be a unity between the subconscious and the conscious mind long enough to have such an agreement, such an accordance. And there's so many words in the English language that indicate that understanding. Accordance is one of them.
Please continue, because I just sit back and listen, and I know that others do as well, and they've written to me and said, all we want is for James to talk. We just want to hear what he has to say.
Well, I can't do any burlesque. I can't sing and I can't dance. And, you know, but I like to be able to enter into people's thoughts. That's one of the most wonderful things. That's why a poet exists. Trying to find something to reach other people with is the most noble pursuit on the planet. And we have lost the scientists today that would agree to that. They are have their noses put to the grindstone of the military-industrial complex so much. It becomes a model for industry. It becomes a model for the way these corporations are running their R&D programs. And, you know, inside there's criminal behavior going on all the time. People are sidestepping laws because they work for a corporation that can bail their ass out if they get in trouble. It's just, what can we get away with? And none of that None of that is the way it should be.
Do you know what upsets me as a person, as a writer, as someone who likes to be creative? When you say that this is a failed experiment, everything that has ever been created here with regards art, music, writing, discoveries, if we are a failed experiment and when we all leave, none of this, none of what we have done here, what the hundreds of thousands of incredibly talented artistic people have created and brought into being through their minds, through imagination, through their talent, with their art, none of it will be remembered.
Well, I'm not going to give you a carrot, but I'll say this. How there is a place where the entire history of your ancestors, up to the point where they came from Mars to Earth, there's a repository for almost everything, every significant thing, and even some relatively insignificant things occurred in Phobos, the moon of Mars. And all of it's there. So, that isn't to say there won't be some record of even this partial manifestation we are in here on Earth today. Earth 2. Of course, these are things that people that you're concerned about in making this tape might not relate to those concerns, but at some point it will, if they progress along the lines I'm laying out.
But these people are very open-minded people, as are many people that eventually do find the interviews that we put out on the blog. And they are increasing in number because we watch the numbers even though Google have actually frozen it. And the people that I've specifically asked for this interview tonight, and it's not just one person, it goes out to everybody who's ever lost anybody and wondered where they went and what happens afterwards, because everybody does. It's the biggest mystery that humanity has, what happens after death. So it's not just for them, it's for friends I have who are very, very ill at the moment. And it's for them too. But I think what's more important is when you encompass it all as a whole and you look at our species, mankind as a whole, and as we call it Earth 2, because we are not on the original timeline, because things in the past happened to diverge the timeline. Therefore, we are a partially manifested reality where this experiment is being allowed to play out in order to see if we can actually overcome the monsters, as we call them, because at the end of the day, that's exactly what they are, because they have created this reality by the very acts that they did in the future, in what we class as the future, going back to the past in order to instigate this whole future for themselves, for greed, for everything that goes against what mankind should stand for growth, for development. And it is a disease. This whole timeline is a disease, even though there have been some beautiful things in it.
I wish people could understand that Bohemian Grove ritual, cremation of care. I wish they could understand what that means.
Well, why don't you explain it? Because it's something we've discussed in the last couple of days. Go into detail so that people do understand it, because most people won't have even heard of it.
When we are whole as a human being, we feel a community of like-mindedness that can commune with everyone. We aren't stricken off into little groups that develop antagonisms towards each other, but we are capable of empathy. We're capable of mercy. We're capable of suffering in any way, in the process of being any party to anything harming others. The monsters, the people that run this planet, the people that are political leaders and some military leaders and industrial CEOs, corporations that make money off war, these people observe this ceremony, which is called cremation of care. It's a destruction of empathy, of anything that will in any way inhibit objectifying power and money as the highest aims. And this is done at the expense of compassion, of human decency, of generosity, all of the qualities that will persist beyond the grave. Now, why would we devolve if we had any belief whatsoever in anything finer than this carnal life and carnal experience? Because we don't believe in anything. Only when you reach a point where you have decided that you're the finest example of what the universe can produce, that you have reached the heights or whatever, which these monsters all want to believe more than anything else. So they take and they denigrate anything that sets a standard any finer than themselves. And ultimately, that's Satanism. That's what Satanism is all about. The prince of the earth, prince of darkness, prince of the end, whatever, the Antichrist, anti. Anything that's got the word anti in front of it, that means devolution, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it goes against everything that is good.
Well, if you base what you are in terms of an antagonism towards something else, you've lost the game. You have stopped your growth. You stopped your self-identity because it's based on an antagonism towards somebody else. So, that's what Satanism is. I don't think of a fallen angel. I don't think of another god, a sub-god or an anti-god or whatever. I think of an emptiness, a void. Somebody that's going to deny there's anything in the universe finer than themselves. And by God, if there isn't something in the universe finer than Bill Gates, Rupert Murdoch, President Obama, take me now, Oblivion.
We could go a long way with that list, to be honest. We could add quite a few more names to that.
Name about 5,000 more. But they're all in position of power, not because of bloodline or not because of ideology. They are because they all have the values of a pig, a clutching, eat anything and everything in sight pig.
To be fair, they are completely dehumanized.
They are. And proud of it. And if they weren't, if that wasn't an objective of that, why would they have that ceremony? Cremation
of care.
Yeah, says it all.
Cremation, literally. The cremation, the destroying of any care whatsoever. It's like you said, these people are in charge of our planet.
They're destroying this planet. Agenda. Anybody that gives up their common sense, their human decency, their sense of perspective for an agenda is going to fall into this hole, this void. Even people who have agendas that are worthwhile, or they have causes that are worthwhile. When it becomes agenda-driven, it becomes mindless. It's just an all-engulfing maw of pursuit in spite of everything else. And then that's when the means become justified by the ends, because it doesn't matter about anything else. It doesn't matter about other people, their feelings, their livelihood, or anything. The people that made up NAFTA and GATT, most soulless son of a bitches on the planet. What was in their mind? Going to take all these jobs, all this business, patents, and everything else away from one country without giving anything in return. And where they took them, they enslaved people even worse than they had here. The girls down in Mexico working on an assembly line for 12 hours a day getting paid $5 a day.
No.
That's my
slavery.
God. Yeah.
Slavery. I just had an idea, a thought came to my head about something that you said once in the past. We know it's bad here. There are people like yourself, like Shuni, Myrid, Crystal, myself, and so many other people. I could name so many people.
There are many, many good people there. Believe me, there's so many good people, and it's my privilege and pleasure to know quite a few of them. And not personally, I don't know, but probably 100 people personally that we share values and goals and feelings. But there's so many more that I know about. And whether I disagree with them or whether I agree with them, these are all people that have a moral core. They have concern for their fellow man. They would never fall to being corrupted. And we agree on all the essentials. We agree on values. We're all concerned over Fukushima. We're all concerned over the chemtrails. We're all concerned over GMO food. And we're all concerned over degradation of the environment as a whole. And we know that it can't go on much longer. there is a cutoff. And we know that the leaders that are responsible for the decisions that have led to this mess are out of their minds.
And I actually believe that even people who aren't aware of all this, they know deep down inside themselves, they cannot deny that something is very, very wrong.
Oh, yes.
They might not be able to understand because they do not have the knowledge base to build upon, because let's face it, we are all portrayed by these very people that are doing this as conspiracy theorists, as nutcases, because God forbid that everybody should actually listen to what we're saying and take an interest in what it is that we're saying. Well, you don't need to go out on a limb and start sprouting woo-woo fluffy bunny nonsense. The evidence is there in front of you each and every single day, with the finances, with the weather, with HARP technology, with the chemtrails, the problems with Fukushima, the increases in cancer. There are really good, honest people out here working hard to try and make people understand what is really going on. And we are fighting a battle, as it were, with the very leaders of this planet who don't want us to say these things, and regularly dispense with people who are too outspoken, who get too close to the truth. And if they don't dispense with them, then they blackmail them, or they use mind control to bring them into their own little way of cremation of care type style of thinking. I understand what you say when you say there are civilizations out there, and that may be a bit of a leap for too many people for me to go from straight into Earth, straight out of Earth. It is a leap. But if you look in from outside at this planet and see the chaos that is going on here, you would be horrified, and you would want to shake the whole thing like some fleas off the back of a dog and say, wake up. Look at what you are doing. Look at what you are allowing to happen to you, because you sit quite contentedly each night in front of your reality TV while the world is going to shit around you, and you haven't got much longer left because there's not much left to live for.
Well, there are people that are in high places that are indulging a fantasy that they can allow all these things to happen and still survive, that have pipe dreams about reestablishing somewhere else on another planet. And that's not true. They don't have it. Even if they had the technology, because they were participated in this failed experiment. Failed experiments end. Partial manifestation is very real. Ironically, but nobody's going to survive a partial manifestation experiment that has failed. Nobody. You'll survive as a spirit. You have no memory of this. It'll be like nothing ever happened on Earth.
Could you just go into more detail with regards to partial manifestation? Because a couple of years ago I didn't understand it, but I do understand it now. Can you say it in a way whereby people can try and understand it? You and I both know, and some of our listeners, that it's actually quite a deep subject and not one that you can just discuss in 5 minutes. But if you'd like to touch upon that for those that may be, new to this interview tonight, that, this discussion that you and I are having.
Any time that the technology reaches a point where they can interfere with the continuum, and does so, they don't change the continuum. What they do is they create a new timeline that's partially manifested, because the continuum must be protected at all costs. There are many reasons for that. And what will happen is that this becomes this partial manifestation that is this timeline, is made a partial manifestation as a quarantine, and it's watched, because it's got to earn its right to be ever fully manifested. And if it doesn't, well, I think that maybe Stephen King had a predilection of this type of thing when he wrote The Langoliers. And if anyone is interested in knowing what that is, see the movie or read the book, because that's the only explanation for the theme that is in that book at all. That a timeline that is destroyed, it was an extended timeline or an alternate timeline because people were stupid enough to interfere with the continuum. And then it was allowed long enough to see if it could produce something new to the universe, something worthwhile. And if it didn't, then it is dissolved. But these spirits that come and go in it, they are not.
And I think that's an important point to remember, that we are not just our physical bodies. So some people might be quite horrified what you've just said. In effect, we are living in a partially manifested timeline whereby at any point this experiment could be ended.
If you want to see the evidence of that, like I've said many times, get a program which gives you a fix of the skies and get a location for where you are at night on a particular time and date. Go outside and look at the stars and planets and see if they're where they should be. If you'll do that 3 times in 1 week, you'll find at least once when they're out of place. They're out of place because 2 planets can't occupy the same space at the same time. Real simple.
You've been saying that to me for years and I've only just clicked.
Well, that's because you're stubborn.
That's because I'm busy. And like everybody else here, we have to live and eat and breathe and pay the bills and work like dogs, even when we really want to be doing exactly what I'm doing now, 24 hours a day, which is learning the truth.
Well, if people want to further their, want another historical perspective of when that alternate timeline was created, we did a video, Napoleon in the Pyramid, and that'll tell you a lot, and it'll give you evidence. And the fact, I became emboldened to discuss it because about the time we made that, they had discovered a chip in Napoleon's skull.
Which hadn't actually been developed until the last 8 months.
Well, before we made that video. We made that video about 7 or 8 months ago, something like that. So it's about a year ago. And I gave the date that they would actually do it. They would go back in time to when Napoleon was in the pyramid and put a chip that would create a bias. And that bias would affect what he was going to do. And it did. And it reversed history, but it did not change that original timeline. It just created a new one because then the continuum couldn't be repaired if it didn't happen this way. There is a term for this type of phenomena. And, as this becomes more and more discussed in the public domain, that term will emerge. I won't mention what it is because it may be a little different than what I might say, and I don't want to affect. I'm always interested in seeing what's going to operate on its own without any interference from me. But I'm a lot more active in this lineage than I have been in others because it's going to be the last lineage. And I'd like to think that you were given every chance you could.
And that is specifically why you chose to come to this timeline, because it was a partial manifestation.
Well, even more than that, it has become a partial manifestation, but I've been around way longer than that in this lineage and in others. What has complicated the issue in this lineage, of course, has been the EMVs.
Yeah.
And now this tampering of the continuum, creating an alternative timeline. Of course, I enjoy the variations. I've been observing this sort of thing and trying to make sense of it for a long time, and anything new makes things more interesting to me. But I feel for the children, I feel for the people, and the friendships, and the people whose work I respect, the intelligent concern. There are many people that are well worth, that have earned the right to a heritage that they won't have if things don't work out.
And our most immediate issue with regards to that, and we have to touch upon it just very, very briefly tonight, is Fukushima. Because our colleagues, Myra and Kevin Blanche and yourself, have worked extremely, extremely hard to make the public aware of the dangers that we are in. And, they're not minimal dangers.
Well, it's been Kevin Blanch's life work.
Yeah.
And there are so many really self-sacrificing anti-nuke people in the movement. There's Lauren Ray, there's Christina Consola, Andrew Absu, who makes just incredible movies. All of these are wonderful people who have devoted almost the whole of their industry and resources to making a difference. And of course they are making a difference, but will it be enough? I don't know. All I can say is that I'm looking to, as things happen for the worst, I'm looking at this giant we call the American public waking up, and the same thing elsewhere. You know, I'm an American. I love my country. I know something about the people of my country, and although they're disappointing in many ways, when they're awakened, when they have a cause, they're very brave and courageous people. And they will step up to the plate if there's enough time to have a plate to step up to.
I think we all will, James, if you want the truth. Not just the American public. I mean, you are the focus on the planet at the moment, because those that have eyes to see and actually do spend time looking at what's really going on are pretty much looking in a goldfish bowl within a goldfish bowl. And America is the second goldfish bowl, because the trigger will be over there.
It may just be that. In fact, whereas the monsters have pretty well had their way everywhere else, America, the people have kept their guns in spite of all kinds of maneuvers, false flags, irregularities, treasonous acts at all levels of the government. They've remained stayed in that. I can remember when people around the world thought we were cowboys and made jokes about our guns and so forth. They're not doing that now. And we're the only reason that a lot of these people are not in chains or dead. So that's an irony. And that hope gets to these people, because it's time for us all to realize one thing. If we can show that we will stand together, the more we do that and the sooner we do that, the less bloodshed will be caused in the resolution.
Resolution or revolution?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I think we've gone full circle. There's nothing important today that we can discuss. It's not going to end up at the same place.
Exactly.
Really.
And it always will do.
Well, that's what it's come to today. That's what it's come to. I hate to see anything that goes into any discussion, documentary work, or whatever today with Fukushima and with what else is going on in the world, with this mindless New World Order that seems to want World War III. I hate to see anything that does not take into consideration and bring up these subjects, because if you've got enough people's attention to make it worthwhile, and that can be 2 or 3 people, then you need to say, hey, look, the bus is coming and you're in the way.
Yeah. Okay, I think we'll wrap that up. I just want to say a thing at the end, just to direct people towards the blog, which is emvsinfo.blogspot.com. And we have numerous interviews on the blog, audio interviews, written articles that give an awful amount of information with regards what is happening on the planet at the moment, and answers to questions which many of you will probably already have asked yourselves at some point before. So James can also be contacted on Facebook. He's very welcoming. He tends to answer questions if you ask them. And please come visit us. If you have any questions, put them on the blog post. And if you have any questions for James, by all means, go and find him on Facebook. Oh, and one last thing. To the people who asked me to do this interview tonight, I hope that you gain some peace from what James has said with regards what happens when someone passes over. It's never easy, but to know that the spirit of your loved one does go somewhere better surely must be some kind of comfort. And my love goes out to you both. And on that note, I will say good night. And thanks for listening. Okie dokie.
Thank you very much, James.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Good night, my friends.
I'll speak soon. Good night, both
James.
of you.